Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. Fire up the grill this 4th of July and enjoy ribeye steaks or burgers for an epic outdoor barbecue. Don't forget to grab some of Safeway's fresh produce for all your summer favorites. Safeway.com. Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.
If hiking is one of your summer activities, heads up that this season is not off to a particularly great start in Colorado, at least not if you measure by the number of search and rescue calls. In Summit County, they're on pace to have the busiest year ever. Across the state, the most common reasons for rescue calls are leg injuries, getting lost, and being unprepared for the weather or the elevation gain. I'm Bazi Kanani. Coming up, Coloradans are supposed to be getting a clearer picture of local police departments' use of force, but we're not.
Even though the state has required this, that data is full of holes.
Then, Colorado's public lands might be for sale again.
No one in my district is asking for a wholesale sale of public lands.
You'll get the latest on the policy whiplash, plus results from this week's special election.
Douglas County turned out across party lines to say that home rule is not something that we want.
And some ideas for your weekend. It's Thursday, June 26th. Here's the news in Colorado today. What was hailed as a huge step toward police accountability and transparency in Colorado has stalled. In 2020, after nationwide protests over George Floyd's murder, Colorado said it would collect data on police officers' use of force and publish that data. But 5 years on, it's not really happening.
Now, here we are, 2025, and I'm scratching my head going, why is this so hard?
That's Serena Gonzalez Gutierrez. She's one of the state lawmakers who sponsored the police reform bill that required police departments to share their data on incidents involving the use of force. CPR's Ben Marcus and Allison Sherry have been digging into this, and Ben joins us now. Ben, before we get into why this isn't happening, can you first tell us what the expectations were? What were Colorado's police departments asked to do?
So to get into that, let's go back to when this big police reform bill passed. It's June of 2020. The Capitol in Denver has been rocked by 9 days plus of protests. And lawmakers said, we hear you. And we want to change the status quo of policing in Colorado. There were many controversial aspects of this big police reform bill. There's body cam for every department and every officer. But one of the measures, which is seen as critically important, was not really all that controversial or not controversial at all, was we will collect data on every use of force in Colorado, every officer, every department in the state of Colorado. And a use of force is like policing. Sometimes force is necessary to effectuate an arrest, to make sure that people are safe. That's unholstering a weapon and pointing at somebody. It's taking them to the ground. It's all these number of things. But we didn't really have a good sense in the state of Colorado as to which departments were doing it more often than others, which departments may use different techniques more than others. And we found that 5 years later, even though the state has required this, that data is full of holes. Some of the largest and some of the smallest departments are having trouble reporting it. The state's having trouble taking the ones that do report and displaying that data. And some departments just aren't reporting it at all.
You mentioned that some departments have submitted at least some data. Can you tell us which departments are complying and which aren't?
So Denver Police Department is an interesting one. They're the largest police department in Colorado. They show almost no uses of force in the most recent report from the state. When we asked Denver Police Department, they wouldn't grant an interview, but in an email, they told us that they gave the data to the state in what they called a data dump. They said that it couldn't be merged with the state's existing tool, so it's not shown on their public database. We don't know the exact technical issue. DPD says, though, that they have fixed those problems, and in future reports in future years, DPD's data will be included. Looking at Denver specifically, what's weird is I can come up with 3 different numbers for use of force in the year 2023, which is the year the last state report covers. The state data shows in a table 132 incidents in 2023. Later in the report, it says, quote, Denver had use of force on 3,000 citizens, unquote. And then Denver has its own dashboard on its own website that says 844 incidents in 2023, and I can't tell you which one is the right number. We talked to smaller departments like Rocky Ford Police Department in the far southeast corner of the state. They report 0 contacts, 0 use of force in the state report. I called up the department. The chief picks up. He says, well, I started here in April. And as soon as I saw that we weren't reporting it, I immediately changed that, and we are reporting that data now. He said he couldn't explain why they weren't reporting it. Grand Junction, they said that they were still building their system in 2023 and that in next year's report, you'll start to see their data included. So it kind of runs the gamut from departments as to why there's this problem getting that data to the state and getting it displayed properly.
So some of the data we do have is inconsistent, some of it flat out wrong. 5 years does seem like a reasonable amount of time to work out the glitches here. Who is supposed to be enforcing the law, and what do they say?
Well, that's a good question, who's supposed to enforce the law. I'm not sure we really know that. But we do know that the Division of Criminal Justice in the state of Colorado is tasked with collecting it and then publishing the reports. In an email, they told us that it's still early days, even though it's 5 years later. And then they said, quote, they do not have the statutory authority to compel agencies to submit data in a particular format or adopt uniform definitions, unquote. They did say, though, that more departments are complying. They're using the systems. They're figuring it out. I mean, we're 5 years after George Floyd was killed, and I can't tell you, based on the data that we have, what the state of use of force by police is in Colorado from a statewide perspective. It may be years still until they figure out the technical issues and they get acceptance from departments, and so we just don't know when we will have quality data that will allow lawmakers to make informed decisions about policy.
CPR's Ben Marcus, thank you.
Thank you.
You can read more from Ben's reporting at the link in our show notes. The fight over whether to sell federal lands in the West is starting to have more twists and turns than the Colorado River. The idea was in the Republicans' so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, and then it was out, and now it might find its way back in again to require the sale of over 1 million acres. Republican leaders want to get the big bill to the president's desk by the end of next week, so it's crunch time to figure out what's really in it. Arlo talked with CPR's Washington, D.C. correspondent Caitlin Kim, who's been staying on top of these rapid changes.
Lynn, what's going on with this proposal? Is it in? Is it not?
Well, what happened is the Senate has a person, the parliamentarian, who enforces rules for what can or cannot be in this bill. And on Monday, the provision to sell public lands for housing or other uses was deemed not allowed. But that ruling hasn't stopped the main backer of this idea, Utah Senator Mike Lee.
And what's Lee doing now?
So after the ruling on Monday, Lee took to social media to say that he'd revised the language, and he has. The new text came out yesterday, and it takes out U.S. Forest Service lands, and instead it's now solely focused on the Bureau of Land Management lands. It's also an even smaller percentage of land. 0.25% to 0.5% of BLM lands would be put up for sale in 11 states. And now it would be for the development of housing or to address any infrastructure and amenities to support local needs associated with housing. And the big change is any land sold would have to be located within 5 miles of, quote, the border of a population center. So he's narrowing which lands would be eligible and how they could be used.
That's definitely a lot narrower than it was before. Has making the proposal that way changed any minds in Colorado's congressional delegation?
No, it doesn't seem like that's the case. Senator John Hickenlooper called the whole idea flat out wrong. And before the new language came out, Republican Representative Jeff Hurd and Democratic Representative Joe Neguse joined together in a statement condemning the whole idea. Hurd told me the idea is deeply unpopular with his constituents.
Decisions when it comes to public land should be made by the people that live in that part of our country, and no one in my district is asking for a wholesale sale of public land. So adamantly opposed to it.
I would also point out that local leaders expressed one other concern to me. Lee says it's for housing. The word that's missing, though, is affordable. States and local governments may get the right of first refusal to buy that land, but that's really up to the Interior Secretary to decide. And many local leaders worry that even if they do get that, first offer to buy the land, they won't be able to afford it. So what it boils down to is anyone can buy the land and build a McMansion or a second home. And local officials I've talked to say that's not going to help the housing crisis in a lot of mountain communities. Also, many pointed out there is already a process for local governments to buy public lands that the federal government has decided to get rid of, so they don't see the need for required land sales.
So then what happens next?
Well, the parliamentarian will look at Lee's new phrasing and decide, if it's allowed to be in the bill. So we're still waiting on that. If it is allowed, part of the process to pass this type of legislation is dealing with a lot of amendments, mainly offered by Democrats. I imagine some senators may try to force a vote on public land sales during this amendment process, and I think that would be tough for some Western Republican senators to support, on its own. But if it still survives that and makes it out as part of the Senate version of the One Big Beautiful Bill, it will have to go back to the House. Hurd and at least one other Republican say they're opposed, but, they'll be under a lot of pressure from Republican leaders who want to pass the One Big Beautiful Bill by July 4th and get it to the president's desk.
CPR's Washington, D.C. correspondent Caitlin Kim. Thank you so much, Lynn.
Thank you, Arlo.
The results now from the special election in a Colorado county whose commissioners want more leeway to break from state policy. Douglas County voters appear to have rejected the commissioner's attempt to become a home rule county. Unofficial returns show that more than 70% of those who voted said no thanks. Organizers of the No campaign celebrated at a restaurant in Lone Tree on Tuesday night. Barrett Roth from Castle Pines said the preliminary results sent a clear message.
I think Douglas County turned out across party lines to say that home rule is not something that we want. We want elected officials that put their head down and do their job and don't try to make headlines.
Voters were not swayed by the Douglas County Commissioner's pitch that county home rule would be a good way for the county to assert its independence from the Democratic-controlled state legislature. County home rule doesn't offer policy control as much as city home rule does. On Tuesday, County Commissioner George Teal told us that he believes the vote tallies do reflect some residents' key concerns, that the special election was too rushed and that people need more information. But he said he's not done with the idea of home rule.
I myself stand committed to continue to work on home rule for Douglas County. It is something that I've advocated for years, and it's something that I'm going to continue to advocate for because I do believe it is the best method for ensuring local control to the people of Douglas County.
Around 30% of the county's voters cast ballots in this special election. If you could use a good laugh, you may want to head to Boulder this weekend for the Boulder Comedy Festival, which promises to poke fun at its hometown.
Boulder paints a spiritual gloss on everything.
Sam Shea is one of the comedians performing.
While normal people go normal dancing, Boulder people go ecstatic dancing. In the corner of the dance floor lurks the spiritual pickup artist known as Tantra Man. You can easily spot Tantra Man. The shabby chic facial hair, man bun atop his crown chocolate. His shirt unbuttoned, one too many, revealing his own shaped moonstone medallion.
Also performing, Janae Suplee, who's from Denver. She has a bit about birth control that she says she particularly likes performing for women.
Like the guys who think when I say labia minora, it's like, oh, that's what you light at Hanukkah. No. IUD, not a DUI, sir. No. Wrong acronym.
The comedy festival runs through Sunday. A few other things happening this weekend. The Clifford Still Museum in Denver has a free day on Sunday, and the largest Pride event in the Rocky Mountain region takes place in Denver on Saturday and Sunday, including a 5K, a festival, and the parade. You can find more on these and other ideas in this week's Colorado Arts Spotlight at the link in our show notes. CPR's Lauren Antonoff-Hart writes the Arts Spotlight. Additional reporting for today's show also came from CPR's Ryan Warner and Stephanie Wolf. To keep up with what's happening in Colorado, be sure to follow Colorado Today in your podcast app. I'm Bazi Kanani. This is CPR News.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. Fire up the grill this 4th of July and enjoy ribeye steaks or burgers for an epic outdoor barbecue. Don't forget to grab some of Safeway's fresh produce for all your summer favorites. Safeway.com. Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.